Ever since the ROG Ally was announced, there's been a boatload of comparisons between the Steam Deck and the new handheld from Asus. Now, I've done exactly that same thing. I've talked about how these two devices compare to each other. But something that I've seen recently is something that I find confusing. I've seen a lot of people, especially in the comments of my videos, say things along the lines of the ROG Ally is better, or that the Steam Deck is better. And they both are correct, and they're both also incredibly wrong. I understand why people like to make comparisons. I like to make comparisons. I understand why people want to say, all right, I want to play this game. Should I play it on the Xbox or should I play it on the PlayStation? Or maybe the Xbox is better because of Game Pass, or the PlayStation is better because of exclusives, or the Nintendo Switch is better because it's portable, or the Steam Deck is better because of Valve's library and comfort. And you can make a lot of arguments about how this system is better, has a better use case than that system. A lot of times it boils down to straight up numbers, which I personally find to be ridiculous. I think that the folks over at Digital Foundry do a really good job by comparing what a game looks like on various platforms. I don't think that they're doing anything wrong, but what I often see is people use things that we see at Digital Foundry as evidence that their preferred system is better than another. For instance, when a game runs at 2160p on one system and on the other system it runs at, we'll say, 1800p. Is it better? Yes, it absolutely is. But at the same time, unless you're looking at these things side by side, where you're looking at both systems at the same time, I think that most people would be very hard pressed to tell the difference between those two things. And when we're looking at something like the Steam Deck versus the ROG the ROG Ally, I think that I've seen a lot of people making comments that are comparing the two things, which again is fine. But then they fall into this blatant and ridiculous fanboyism where they think that they have to defend their choice against others. So in this video, I want to talk about what are the differences between the two. Even though I don't have my hands on the ROG Ally yet, I have yet to make a decision on whether or not I'm going to pick one up. It really depends on what people are saying about it once they actually get their hands on it. Now, speaking of people getting their hands on it, we all know that LTT, Linus Tech Tips, got their hands on the Asus ROG Ally. And I was watching a recent episode of The WAN Show, and Linus was talking about the fact that it's really, really powerful, and he is very, very impressed with the ROG Ally. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the ROG Ally is better than the Steam Deck. And once more, it really doesn't matter. And we'll get to why it doesn't matter in a little bit, so stick around for that. When somebody says that, thing A is better than thing B, a lot of times what they fail to say is that it's for their use case. Now, when I looked at the Steam Deck, when it first launched, the thing that I got super excited about was not that it was more powerful than the Nintendo Switch. The thing that I was more excited about was the fact that it was giving me the control over a lot of stuff. Not because it's more powerful than the Switch, but because it's more open than the Nintendo Switch. You see, when you are playing a game on the Steam Deck, you have the ability to increase your frame rate by changing the resolution or changing, what anti-aliasing you're using, or, you change what kind of shadows are in the game, and you get to decide how well the game performs to a point. You also get the ability to lock the frame rate to a certain number, and like 40 frames per second, in order to maintain smoother gameplay. On top of that, the Steam Deck also allows you to adjust the controls to best fit you. I'll give you an example. Shovel Knight Dig. I love Shovel Knight Dig. I think that game is absolutely fantastic. When you are digging down over and over and over, you kind of spam the dig button. You're like pressing the dig button over and over as you're digging. So one of the things that I did is I bound one of the back paddles to basically, if I held it down, to spam that button for me so that I didn't have to just keep hitting the button over and over. I did the same thing with ROG Legacy, where when I was playing ROG Legacy, I didn't really like hitting the left bumper with my finger in order to like bounce off stuff. So I ended up binding that to one of the back paddles. There's a million different combinations of inputs that you can have with the Steam Deck because it has all of those controls. For that use case, the Steam Deck is better. But when you're looking at straight up power, according to Linus Tech Tips, the Asus ROG Ally is 2 times as powerful or 2 times faster than the Steam Deck. Now, this means that there are going to be games that are absolutely going to play better on the Asus ROG Ally. Does it mean that the Asus ROG Ally is better than the Steam Deck? It depends on who you're talking to. So when people say that A is better than B or B is better than A, instead of simply telling them that they're wrong or arguing with them, ask them about their use case. Why do they think that this is better than that? Why would you prefer to have one over the other? I don't know how I feel about the Asus ROG Ally because I don't have one yet. And I see a lot of people, without getting their hands on it, automatically writing it off. And I think that that's a mistake. I think that's myopic, and I think it's foolish. I will say that the D-pad on that thing looks awful. That being said, I also thought that the D-pad on the DualShock 4 looked terrible. Same thing with the DualSense Edge. Same thing with the newer Xbox ones where they're kind of like slanted on the edges. And the same thing with the Stadia controller. I thought all of those D-pads looked awful, and I liked them all. I thought that they were fine. So, it's too early to tell, and making up your mind ahead of time before you actually have your hands on the device, I think is just kind of a goofy thing to do. The last thing that I'll say is why it doesn't matter. When we're looking at things, comparing things like the Xbox to the PlayStation, it does matter which one you get, because which one you get will determine which games that you have access to. If you get an Xbox, then you're not going to be playing Horizon Zero, whatever the latest Horizon game is. If you're buying a PlayStation, then you're not going to be playing the latest Halo. And so I do understand why people make that decision a big deal. Deciding which camp you're going to go into limits you as to which games you're going to be able to play. But when it comes to the Steam Deck and the Asus ROG Ally and every other PC handheld form factor system out there, handheld form factor PC is I think what I meant to say, all of those things, you put all of those things together, they all play the same damn games. Yes, the Steam Deck is running Linux, and that means that there will be a few games that you can't play because of DRM or launchers or anti-cheat software. And hopefully, over time, then those developers find ways to fix that, to get around that, because it's in their best interest to, because it makes it a more open platform. Yes, there will be games that you can play on the Asus ROG Ally that you can't play on the Steam Deck. And there are going to be games that you can play on the Steam Deck that you can't play on the Asus ROG Ally because of the controls. But for the most part, 99% of it is going to be playing the same games. And so your decision or my decision to either pick up a Steam Deck or the new thing is no different than you building a PC and me going and buying one from Alienware. There's no difference. We have access to the same games. Yes, one might run things a little bit smoother and one might have other advantages, but at the end of the day, we have access to the same games. So what I'm making this video for is to try and tamp down on some of the console wars tribalistic mentality that I've seen in the comment section of my videos anytime that I talk about the Asus ROG Ally. I know a lot of you think of my channel as a Steam Deck channel, but it's not. It's a channel about video games, and I like all video games. It's not just games that I'm playing on my Steam Deck. And if that's not why you're here, I totally understand. But I think that tribalism and console wars is just a huge waste of everybody's time. But you know what's not a waste of your time? Checking out this video right here. From the NerdNest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everybody.